Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, dependent, of course, on where you are joining us. Um, I am Jordan Abbott, your host, aka the Sales Poet, and this is the EPN podcast that's been designed to demystify the sales profession and try and remove some of the stigma that does surround the profession for those that are either just embarking on their sales career or maybe considering a career in sales for them. We're looking to do that by chatting to different sales leaders that can share some insights into their journey, share tips, tricks, and any guidance that they've acquired along the way. Now, today we are joined by Jason Smith, who has worked in both B2C and B2B sales environments and has built and led B2B sales teams. So, with that in mind, Jason, can you introduce yourself and just share a little bit more about you?
Sure, Jordan. Thanks for having me. A little bit about me. I'm currently the AVP and head of growth for an organization that is focused on digital simulations for organizations, helping support development in leadership, digital, and culture is part of that. I've been in the learning development space of sales, if you like, for the past coming up 15 years now from my previous organization into what I'm doing now. And it's been a great journey. I live in Oxfordshire, if any of your listeners are familiar with Oxfordshire, so just on the edge of the Cotswolds, so a beautiful part of the world. And I know you're a racing fan, so it's near some of the F1 teams there as well as part of that.
Indeed, indeed. Yeah, my hometown is within a stone's throw of the Red Bull F1 HQ. So
Um,
really, I should be a Red Bull fan, but it's quite the opposite. Really.
Got it. Very nice, very nice.
Yeah. Oh, good stuff. Well, look, thank you very much for joining me today. Um, Curious, how did you get into sales? What was it that sort of piqued your interest in, and what motivated you to stay in sales once you'd actually landed there?
Sure, that's a good question. I'm going to give a bit of a generic answer and then a little bit extra on top of that in terms of my wiring, if you like, which helped me stay in this, I think. So, like many, I fell into sales a little bit. I got very much of a sporting background. That was my life for many years. Like many young teenagers, I thought I was going to be a professional footballer. I was playing professional football and sport for a long time. I didn't get my pro contract at that point, and then sort of had that moment in life where you go, what am I going to do, and where's this going to take me now as part of that? I was fortunate enough that my sporting career at least gave me enough to get me into university and get some skills there as part of that. And I ended up in more of a retail B2C, as you mentioned, sales environment to start with, because I thought, hey, look, I like nice things, I like fashion and things like that, so that will be a good place. I soon realized that retail wasn't the space that I wanted to be in, and I came across an organization at the time called Franklin Covey, which was an organization, if anyone's come across the likes of Stephen Covey's work around the 7 habits of highly effective people and some of the work around that, and just fell in love, I think, because of that personal sporting background, fell in love with personal development and what that looked like, and that was my first introduction to sales. It was very much what you would class as maybe a typical sort of BDR type role in terms of generating new leads and working strongly with marketing and sales to try and bridge that gap as part of it. And that was really what was my platform, if you like, into sales.
Nice, nice. What were the key differences that you noticed in terms of the approach from B2C then to moving into B2B?
Sure. I think that the biggest, so that I guess the mindset shift that I had is part of that was really the types of reasons for buying and some similarities in that as well. So thinking about the emotional element of why people buy, that was still there. It still carried over from B2C. But clearly there was a very different approach, which I soon had to learn. And I had some good guidance along the way, which was I need to start to know business and understand business a bit more as part of that. And so that was probably one of the big differences that I found going into then a B2B environment, is I needed to learn a bit more about the organizations and their structures and how they approach things.
Yeah. Yeah. And would you say that was the biggest challenge that you faced in those early days? Just sort of getting that business acumen sitting behind the actual sort of the approach that you were implementing?
I think it was certainly one of them. I think I was very fortunate in myself that there was a level of business aptitude that I had anyway, so that helped, and curiosity around businesses and why they were successful and why others weren't. So I think that definitely helped me. I think one of the biggest things I soon realized is, especially within a heavy cultural environment, you can get fixated on the product or the solutions that you're selling as part of that, and that can consume your world. And actually to step outside of that and think of the bigger picture was a big thing for me. And that was the steer. I remember getting that feedback actually very early on in my career. And that was a game changer for me in terms of thinking about more holistically the environment that we're operating in, and how does that connect together, not just from the world that we're living in right now and selling, but how does that impact other things as part of that?
Yeah. And I mean, that's crucial when engaging with buyers who are battling with those challenges that are outside of the specific pain that you're solving, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Brilliant. Brilliant. So I would imagine that sort of curiosity, that open-mindedness, ensured that you were able to be adaptable to various changes that have taken place throughout your career. But I mean, on top of that, I think that in sales, we typically feel the brunt of any shift in buyer behaviors, market conditions. So have you got any other tips or guidance in terms of how people can stay really flexible and adaptable throughout those periods of drastic change?
Yeah, I think the first thing is understanding the change itself is really important. Again, I'm going to talk about my career, and I'm very lucky that I lived and breathed the learning development world. And so coming across aspects and concepts such as change and really understanding the nuts and bolts of that and where we sit in change and how others, react to change was something that was in my world, if you like, that I was lucky enough to get used to. So I think firstly was the realization around the change that's continuously happening around us, and tracking where you sit in that. Do I feel that I'm in a place where I'm this ambiguity is causing me some friction or unnerve, whatever that might be for you. I think so. Understanding that, and then thinking about what are the things that I can start to influence within my sphere of influence. How can I start to look at some of those things? So that was the biggest things, I think, looking at change, doing a lot of reading around what was happening and going on. Again, I think it ties to having a broader picture of what's going on in the world. I think that helps. You can start to make at least a little bit of an educated guess. There's always the unknowns, but an educated guess around what's going on, and try as much as possible to stay a little bit ahead or one step ahead.
Yeah, certainly. That's that really resonates with me. There's an image that I have of the way my brain works. I don't know if you've seen Sherlock Holmes, the ones with Robert Downey Jr. and Jude Law.
Yeah.
And the scene where Watson walks in on Sherlock and there's just red yarn everywhere. That's how I envision my brain, and I get such satisfaction from connecting those two bits of knowledge with the red yarn. So yeah, reading, trying to just absorb as much as possible and make those hypotheses where possible.
I think it's a great point. There was an image I saw which was around lots of dots being in the air of information and things that are going on, and actually our ability to connect those dots into something meaningful is really important, isn't it? And I think that's a skill in itself, and something that everyone should try and learn and adopt as part of their thinking.
Definitely. Now, in terms of advice or the best pieces of advice that you've been given throughout your career? Are there any standouts that you'd like to share?
It's a great question. I think, again, I'm very fortunate. I've had a series of mentors and friends in my life throughout my career that have really supported me and helped give me some of those aha moments in my career, which have transitioned or really catapulted me into a certain area. And I think the one that comes to mind is a mentor and a friend that really helped me get out of my own head, especially in sales. When you're new to sales and for the first time you're speaking to business leaders about business, and maybe there's some things that you don't know, and you don't want to feel a bit, like you're looking stupid or anything like that. And so he really really helped me get out of my own head and realize that actually this is just a conversation that we're having with two individuals. We're both human beings as part of that, with things going on, and just have a really good conversation and lean on your natural curiosity in the conversation, because that will get you so far as part of that anyway, in understanding, what's happening in their world, and if you can help. So I think that was a big one for me that stands out.
Yeah, definitely. I keep hearing curiosity, and I love that. The old saying, curiosity killed the cat, but knowledge brought it back. It's one of those things that just really rings true for me. Now, you've been in the L&D space, sort of championing personal and professional development.
Yeah.
Are there any best practices that you've adopted to ensure that you're consistently dedicating the necessary time to professional development?
That's a very good question again. And I could probably stew on that one for a while, but I guess there's a few things. I think one is I like to read. I like to listen to a lot of podcasts and hear what's out there and hear from different people, and always try and be a student in my own mind. I heard someone talk about that always be a student and always be a scientist, trying to test things, learn from that, reapply it somewhere else, and get that feedback and go again. And so I've always thought of my learning in that sense. And so I some things that always help me, and I always go back to, is whenever I'm driving anywhere, a podcast and listening to what's going on. And it could be something completely out of the ordinary. It could be listening to a bit of Freakonomics that, doesn't tether to, the work or learning and development necessarily. So thinking about that, because often you can connect dots between that and something else, and it stimulates thought. So that's been a go-to for me. And then just a lot of reading. And I think people often say reading business books, but I also would recommend just reading fictional pieces as well, because for me, that certainly has helped me think about things differently, and attach, the real and, a storyline as part of that. So yeah, they would be my go-tos: reading and podcasts.
Love that. Any particular podcast that you'd recommend?
So I would say there's a few. So Jeb Blount, I listen to quite a bit in terms of the sales arena and thinking about that. I'd also listen to The Future of Learning, again, because it's not just looking at learning itself, but it's and I forget the gentleman's name now, but he's interviewing a lot of different professionals within an environment of an organization. So it could be an operations director, it could be HR, but again, it gives you a lens of how they think in that world, so a much broader perspective. So that would be some of them, and then others that I love to listen to just for my own sanity are things like the Daily Stoic and things like that. Always go-tos as well.
Lovely. Now, this next question is one that I imagine will be quite important for some of our listeners. Now, throughout your career building sales teams, that's new. For those that are listening, fireworks just went off. Lost my train of thought. So yeah, throughout your career building sales teams,
yeah,
what are those top skills, or maybe not even skills, but characteristics that you're looking for in sales talent?
Yeah, very, very good question. So I would say, so first and foremost, I would say I'm still again a student in this space as well. I'm constantly trying to learn, and I'm uncovering things as a leader, if you like, in sales more and more. It's funny, you think you know something, and then as you get into it, that you unturn stones, and suddenly there's other things that you need to learn and establish. So I think leadership in general is a constant learning process, and things that are going on. I think in terms of characteristics where I've seen and I look for certainly within sales is, again, we mentioned it a number of times, curiosity. I'm always seeking to see how curious someone is as part of what they do and the questions they ask and why they ask those questions. I think the level of, it's typical, we look at skill and will in sales, don't we? But the level of will for me is really important. You know, skill, and we can work on that together as a leader and a colleague. But I think to have that will to, you know, want to get in the boat and roll your sleeves up and start getting going and make things happen. I think you have to have that level of bite and tenacity to make things work. So I look for that, and they're the people that I tend to attract in my life as well, because that's how I'm wired. And then the other element I try and think of as much as possible, and this has probably come later down the line, but I try and look at the level of trustworthiness, and, you know, in terms of how someone comes across.
Yeah.
How trustworthy are they? And you can only get a certain amount of that clearly from an initial introduction, but actually over time, how trustworthy are they as part of that? Do they say what they're going to, you know, do they say what they, or do what they say they're going to do as part of? And are they able to challenge? That's the other thing I would say. Can they challenge? Sorry, there's a lot there, but they would be the things that come to mind.
No, that's a great list. It's that sort of soft skill versus hard skills, right? The hard skills can be taught. The soft skills are there. They can maybe be developed slightly, but they're more sort of ingrained.
Yeah.
So that's brilliant. And then the last question, I am conscious of time. Following what was for many a pretty tough year last year, what do you believe will be the highest impact activity or approach that any rep can implement moving throughout 2024 to generate more conversations, opportunity, and close one revenue?
Okay, that's a tough one to finish on. So I don't know if there's one answer to this, Jordan. I think, and if anyone's got the silver bullet out there or magic wand, please let me know. But I think the biggest thing that I'm certainly seeing is we are living in a social world now as part of that. And I think people are looking at people and building their own interpretation of that individual's brand, less, you know, even more so than they are an organization's brand as part of that. So I think as much as you can in terms of getting out there, and something I need to do a lot more of as well, and I'm trying to encourage others to do, is to be out there on the likes of social media and sharing their voice a bit louder as part of that. Now, I think that's always tough, especially at the beginning, to try and do that when you're very new to sales or your area of expertise. And so I think as much as you can bring that, I think that'll be a key component. I think the other is that it's not to be single threaded. I think you've got to look across all different aspects and mediums of how you're approaching people. I think it's Daniel Pink that wrote "To Sell Is to Be Human," and I think that there's an element of that. The more human you can come across with people, I think that will really help as well. Create those conversations, and also help, I guess, break down some of the barriers in sales and, you know, buyer and seller relationships that often have been caused through bad or poor selling over a number of years, which I think have created that.
Yeah. That was a fantastic answer, by the way. I know I put you on the spot with a tough one to finish, but yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head. we're at a point where the low barrier to entry for sales in terms of not requiring certification, qualifications, etc., has led to buyers being burnt, and they're now putting up their own barriers. And we can see that because we're not being invited in until they've completed the vast majority of their buying journey. So I think that's the first hurdle, a big one, though it is.
Yeah, no, exactly that. I think the more we can do in that space, the better I think it will do for our profession as well, because I think good sales individuals and professionals, and it is a profession, are looking to help people and help people achieve and succeed and do good things. And that's ultimately what create longer term relationships. I'd say a lot of my success in sales have been through relationships that, have been over a period of time, and they've come back around, later down the line when, timing is right or something's happened and you've been top of mind as part of that. So I think that's a good place to be.
Yeah, definitely. Jason, it has been an absolute pleasure. I've really, really enjoyed that chat. Where's the best place for people to find you?
At LinkedIn, you can follow me on LinkedIn. So Jason Smith at KNOLSKAPE would be a good place to hit me up, and I can share some details with you, Jordan, if that's helpful, just to get out to your listeners as well.